So I just wrapped up a really intense scientific research project and wanted to share some of that with you guys. And by scientific research project, I mean I asked about 5 of my friends that reload, hey, name me a reloading press. And wouldn't you believe it, about 4 out of the 5, I actually never heard from the 5th guy, said, well, RCBS rock chucker. And I don't know about you guys, but that didn't surprise me at all. And actually, if you guys are watching this, you're probably a reloader, and there's a good chance that would have been your first answer too, right? Most of us, well, a good chunk of us learned on an RCBS rock chucker, and if we didn't, our dad did, or our grandpa did, or we know somebody that has one. And there's a pretty good reason for that. They are darn popular, and there's a lot of them out there, and are super high quality reloading presses. Been around for a long time. New ones, I'm really sad to see that, you know, they're not made in the US anymore, and that's kind of a bummer. But the good old ones, Oroville, California manufactured, they're classics. Pretty sure most of you guys have one. But did you know that there's actually a whole series, there's a good name, whole series of reloading and swaging presses that RCBS made prior to the actual rock chucker model. So in early 1940s, there was this awesome fellow, Mr. Huntington, that was really into swaging bullets, and you know, RCBS, rock chuck bullet swage, it's baked right into the name. And he decided he was going to start manufacturing some presses designed just for swaging bullets, you know, mashing a lead core into a copper jacket and creating your own bullets. Up until that point, kind of the popular press was the old Pacific C-frame, and those just weren't strong enough. In fact, if you crank on one of those hard enough, you're probably going to bust it right in half. So Mr. Huntington decided he was going to improve that. And his first design was a welded O-frame press. All the pieces were welded together and then machined out, and those showed up about 1943 or so, and they're pretty darn rare. I don't have one. I would love to, but people are holding on to those things. There weren't very many made, and so they're pretty hard to find. That one would set somewhere over here. And as improvements were made, they were called the A series, and there's a variety of them. And I wanted to run you guys through all these. So if we look at the chronology here, kind of the first prototype ones were over here, and then we get the first actual rock chucker model kind of over here. We have a pre-A, an A, a 2A, and an A2. There's actually a B model kind of right in here, but those are hard to find too. So I don't have one of those. I'd love to have one sometime. Now I'm going to show you some of the key differences in here and how to tell them apart. And if you're real keen, you'll notice that most of them are marked. The pre-A actually isn't, but the A, there's an A right there. 2A, A2. Pretty clear, right? There's some neat little differences in here too. So let's go through those. Time-wise, pre-A's were made about 47 to 56 or so. There's actually two. Sorry, something just bit me on the neck. Two kind of varieties in there. And the major differences is the primer system there. 47 to 51 had a primer slide, and 51-56 had the more primer arm like the rest of these do here. A's about 56 to 59, the 2A 59 to about 61, A2 61 to about 69, kind of right when that rock chucker came in. And then there's actually an A3, which is about 69 to 70-ish, real short-lived, not terribly popular. These are bigger, more expensive to make than the rock chuckers were, so they kind of died out in popularity as people went, swaging got a little less popular and went more just toward the hand loading part of things. The market for these real big, real strong presses kind of died out a little bit. And truth be told, the rock chucker really can handle pretty much everything that these can too. They're just more efficient to make. What I want to do in this video is just go through each one of these and point out some of the kind of the neat features and little differences and how you can tell them apart. The first way you can do that is you look right on the front here. Pre-A doesn't have an A. A, 2A, A2. Cool. Alright, so let's dig in on the pre-A over here. This is actually the press that, if you look at the patent drawing for this series, this A series of the pre-A series presses, this is what's shown on the patent drawing. It's kind of nifty. Dig that up. I'll stick a picture at the end here, but it's actually this press right here that's shown there. This one's cast steel, and in fact all of these, the pre-A through the A2, are all cast steel instead of cast iron. Starting with the rock chucker and then the A3, we get into cast iron presses, but these are all cast steel. That's kind of nifty. For the pre-A, there's no markings on the front other than it says RCBS on this front strap, and on the back strap it says Oroville, California, which is where they're made. Mentioned there's a couple of variations. So the key difference in the 47 to 51 and the 51 through 56-ish is the primer mechanism. So the earlier ones had a kind of a slide in here. I don't have one of those. I'd like to find one. The later, the 51 through 56, had the more familiar primer arm, kind of like the earlier Pacific presses did. This is actually a lot bigger. This is a big chunk of steel, but this one would have had a primer arm here that fed primers in through the slot in this ram. This one's missing, unfortunately, but we know what it looks like. There's no primer feed slot on here, so if you were to look at the other presses, there's a slot in the front strap here where a primer feed mechanism attaches. That would be where the primer arm swings in, picks up a primer. You don't have that on the pre-A's. The press is oriented pretty much vertically. There's no provision to tilt it back or adjust the angle on that. It's also the only one of this series that has upward stroke on the ram. So to bring the ram up, you pull up on the lever, as opposed to all the rest of them, you pull down on the lever. Kind of familiar with what we have today. This, in fact, all of these have a removable bushing at the top here. And they're all just a little bit different. This one, all of them of course are sized for the standard 7/8 diameter die in the middle. This one's 1 1/4 on the outside. And the reason for that being is that a lot of the swaging dies, so that's what these were intended for, is reloading, but also bullet swaging, right? So a lot of the swaging dies were of this larger diameter. So you can take that bushing out if you want to use your swaging dies. All of these presses also have kind of a two-part ram. So there's a large diameter ram and then a smaller piece on the top that's pinned in. You can pull that out. All these have provision for the universal shell holder on the top. There's some variations that had caliber specific shell holders, generally the older ones, but all these here will take the universal shell holders. If we look at the A here, a lot of big differences over the pre-A. Markings on it, we've got an A stamped on the front. We have, actually it says Oroville, California on the front strap, and then RCBS on the back. Paint's pretty much the same. This one has a little bit more blue in it actually. This is kind of just an olive drab color. One thing we notice here is the whole press is mounted on a plate that allows it to be angled back, and actually you can position this in two different locations. More of a two different orientations, more of a vertical orientation, or as I have it here, tipped back. Of course, this one has downward stroke, just like all the rest of them, but we move to a different bushing on the top. This one's actually 1 5/8, which would accommodate some, again, some swaging dies, but I think there were some shotgun dies that were this size, 7/8 in the middle, and I've heard that you could get another bushing that was 1 5/8 outside and 1 1/4 inside, so it would take the swaging dies. Move over to the 2A. This one's about 1959 to 61, very similar to the A, and we have again a removable bushing on the top. Now we're back to 1 1/4 outside, 7/8 inside. This one has wrench flats machined on the side, nice little knurled edges on it. As far as marking goes, stamped patent pending on the top, no date code on this one. Oroville, California on the front, RCBS on the back. Again, downward stroke. It's got the same provision to change the orientation of the press. You can have it vertical or tipped slightly back as I've got here. And then the last one here is the A2, and this is 61 through about 69, right when the rock chucker came out. And again, we have a removable bushing on the top. This one is actually hex on it. Again, 1 1/4 outside, 7/8 inside. It's my understanding there's actually some of these A2 presses that didn't have the bushing system in it. Some were just drilled and tapped for 7/8 right on the top. I haven't seen one of those yet, but I know I've seen some pictures. So, kind of the big difference with this one that you'll notice is that the paint color has changed. These are now the more traditional green crinkle finish paint that's familiar with the rest of the rock chucker series, and went on for many, many years until they started kind of powder coating in that glossy green hammer tone finish. But that one's easy to pull out. This is actually the first one I have that has a patent number stamped on the top, and it's that original patent number that was way back here in the mid-40s. This one has RCBS stamped on the front and the back, and then one other difference here is this window in here is actually about 1/2 inch wider than all the previous ones, and so that makes it a little easier to get your hand in there and set things in there. Again, we have kind of a two-piece ram, universal shell holders, primer arm, place for primer feed, all that kind of good stuff. So at the end here, this is about when the actual rock chucker model was introduced, and then there was an A3, which is very similar to the A2. Didn't sell real great. I mean, they're bigger, more expensive. People were kind of starting to get out of the the swaging. Of course, people still do that, but it wasn't nearly as popular as it was back when these were intended for the market. Big, strong cast steel presses that you could really squeeze some lead with those guys. So thank you guys for watching. I really do appreciate you guys that spend your evening watching me bumble on about this stuff. If you have any questions or comments, or I screwed something up, which I probably did, type it in down there. I love to hear from you guys. If you have any of this stuff, I'd love to hear about it as well. If you have a welded frame one, or a B, or a A3, I can get you my contact info, because I'm probably pretty interested if you're willing to move it on to somebody that would take really good care of it. And I'll be your new best friend, I guarantee it. So, thanks for watching. Get some kids into hand loading, because like a lot of the firearms sports, it's going to die off if we don't get our youngsters involved. So be safe, get the kids involved. Thanks again.